If everything you believe you know about Christmas is just the tip of a gigantic iceberg, imagine that the story of the boy in the manger is not a simple tale, but a cosmic event planned, a turning point in the spiritual history of humanity. Spiritism, based on the fundamental works of Allan Kardec, invites us to look at that night under a completely new light, not as a merely symbolic celebration, but as the arrival of a mission. What did the coming of that being really mean? Prepare yourself, because the answer will shake your certainties and reveal a purpose that changed the destiny of the planet forever.
So, who was that baby, after all? The question that echoes for 2 millennia. For Spiritism, the answer is at the same time simple and of a depth that defies our understanding. Jesus was not an ordinary man, but he was also, according to the Kardec vision, the incarnate God in a magical and unique way. The spirits, in Allan Kardec's foundational work, The Book of Spirits, are exceedingly clear. Jesus was the purest spirit that ever came to earth. Think about that for a second. Among all the billions of souls that have passed through here in all the eras, he is pointed out as the model, the guide, the maximum reference of moral perfection.
This means that he had already completed his evolutionary journey. He already was a perfect spirit, free from the need to reincarnate to learn. He didn't need to be here. And it is exactly there that the story becomes fascinating. His coming was a choice, a mission accepted voluntarily. Imagine the scenario of Earth at that time, a world marked by the law of the strongest, by violence, by slavery, by a spirituality often based on fear and empty rituals. It was a planet of trials and expiations, where souls learned through suffering and pain, slowly and difficult. And then, a spirit of the highest hierarchy, a true Christ, that is, anointed for a special mission, offered himself to come to this spiritual battlefield. He did not come as a conqueror with an army. He came as a teacher. The best analogy we have is to think of a renowned scientist, a genius, who leaves his state-of-the-art laboratory to teach in a rural school, lacking everything, because he believes in the potential of those children. Jesus did something infinitely greater. He submitted himself to the laws of matter, was born one of us, lived our limitations, to show us in practice that it was possible to live differently.
He was, as the spirits define in question 625 of the Spirits book, the most perfect type that God offered to man to serve as his guide and model. And this is a crucial point, model. He did not come to do for us. He came to show us how to do. His life would be the living example, the instruction manual for spiritual evolution. Every gesture, every word, every silence would be a lesson. But this raises a profound and inevitable question. If he was that spirit of light with cosmic power and wisdom, why on earth did he choose to begin his mission in the most humble and fragile way possible? Why a dirty manger in a small town under an oppressive government? Why not a golden cradle in a palace with all the political power to impose changes from the very first day?
The choice of the setting of your birth was not an accident of fate, nor a simple prophecy that needed to be fulfilled. It was the first great lesson, the first sign that the revolution that it brought would not be like any other revolution that the world had ever seen. And it is there that the simplicity of the manger ceases to be just a beautiful image and becomes a spiritual manifesto. What does this radical choice teach us about the true power?
The manger was the first sermon, preached without a single word. While the ancient world venerated emperors on marble thrones and generals in golden chariots, the greatest spiritual master of all time arrived wrapped in simple cloths in a borrowed stable. This was not a condition imposed by poverty. It was a declaration of principles. Spiritism, by analyzing the Gospels, sees in this intentional act a message that would echo throughout the life of Jesus. True power does not reside in the force that dominates, but in the love that serves. The radical humility of his birth dismantled from the first moment all the logic of a planet that believed importance came with wealth and status.
And this was just the opening of an education that was going to shock the world. All of his doctrine that we know through the Gospels was a practical application of the same principle. When he said, "Love your neighbor as yourself," it wasn't a poetic suggestion, it was a spiritual law, as real and concrete as the law of gravity. In Spiritism, studied in works such as The Gospel According to Spiritism, this love is called charity, and charity here goes far beyond giving alms. It is benevolence towards all, indulgence with the faults of others, patience, unconditional forgiveness. Jesus lived this to the extreme. He surrounded himself not with nobles, but with simple fishermen, with despised tax collectors, with people considered impure by society. Each parable, each gesture was a blow to human pride. The story of the Good Samaritan, a devastating criticism of empty ritualism that despises real suffering. The adulterous woman about to be stoned, a public lesson on judgment and mercy. He did not come to found a new religion with sumptuous temples and rigid hierarchies. He came to implant a new consciousness, a consciousness that God is not in a distant place, but within each heart, and that the way to reach him is by transforming oneself and serving one's brother. Christmas, therefore, marks the beginning of the dissemination of this code of conduct that inverts all the values of the material world.
But this puts us before an immense paradox, almost unbearable. If he was that being of pure love, if his message was so revolutionary and beneficial, why was his destiny on earth so brutally tragic? Why was the world's reaction to his light to try to extinguish it with violence, cruelty, and the most painful of deaths? The humility of the manger enchants us, but the violence of the cross terrifies and confuses us. How to reconcile the image of the fragile and adorable child with that of the tortured and abandoned man? It is here that Spiritist vision leads us to the core of the mystery, revealing that the apparent failure was, in fact, the most crucial and triumphant part of the entire plan.
The cross was not the end of the story. It was its most powerful confirmation. Everything that Jesus taught in practice, unconditional love, forgiveness, faith in eternal life, was put to its supreme test in that moment of extreme pain, and he did not falter. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." This phrase, at the height of suffering, was the culmination of all his doctrine. Spiritism understands that the crucifixion was not a sacrifice to appease the wrath of a god, but the final demonstration, made with one's own life, that the spirit is indestructible and that love is stronger than death.
The resurrection, therefore, is not an isolated supernatural miracle. According to Allan Kardec, it is the natural proof of the immortality of the soul, a principle that the Spiritist doctrine demonstrates through mediumship. Jesus showed the way, proved that it is possible to follow it, and then returned to his glorious state of spirit, making it clear that physical death is merely a passage.
So, what is the true Christmas gift, according to Spiritism? It is this living example. It is to know that a being of very high evolution passed through here to leave us a map, the map of inner reform. The spiritual Christmas is not about receiving material gifts, but about receiving and trying to practice the greatest gift ever given, the model of Jesus. Celebrating Christmas is to renew the hope that we can, one day, through our own choices and efforts, evolve in the direction of that light. The manger reminds us of the humility we must have. The cross reminds us of the courage we need. And the final message is that love is the only path that truly leads home.